So welcome to the Node.js Technical Steering Committee meeting for August 2nd, 2023. We'll follow our standard approach of going through the issue that was in the TSC repo, which was 1421. Before we get started, does anybody have any announcements they'd like to share?
Next security release next week, so stay tuned.
That's great, and there's a little bit more details on the website if you're interested. Any other announcements?
We've got some people to promote.
Okay, looks like we've just gone ahead and done that. Okay, in terms of the CPC and board meeting updates, I don't think we have any board meeting updates. I don't know, Rich, if there's anything on the CPC side.
No, it was a working meeting this week.
Yeah. Okay, so we'll jump into the issues themselves. So the first one is number 48890, source add built-in.m file support. I don't know if there's somebody who's been actively involved in that discussion, wants to jump in.
Yeah, this is here.
I can. I open that PR and I can start explaining it. And Geoffrey is another key point that implemented and helped me with it. So there's this discussion around adding .m file support to Node.js. The main reason was to add node option support, which comes with specific limitations. So the main goal was that I think Geoffrey can explain this better, but let me give it a try. Hi, Matteo. So in order to support node options environment variable in .m file, we need to read the file before V8 is initialized. I looked into it. It's possible, but it has limitations such as permissions logic does not apply before V8 is initialized, and so on and so forth. It has some limitations also on the implementation wise, and makes it a little bit complex because you need to handle worker threads and also the actual node process. So while I implemented it, I tweeted about it, and apparently it went sort of viral. It received lots of great feedback and people really loved it. And right now, my suggestion is to, my opinion about this is to land .m PRs with or without node option support. So yeah, and Geoffrey can explain it better than me, I guess.
Yeah, this was kind of my suggestion because we've had requests going back years now related to loader stuff to be able to define loaders through a file rather than having to pass a flag to Node. And Antoine did a PR to attempt to do so by reading a loaders field within package.json, but we didn't really like the implications of that because it was like, well, what about the rest of Node's configuration? And then a week or two ago, someone opened a very similar PR reading a test field in package.json to configure the test runner. And so that's when we were like, all right, there's clearly desire for this. In the earlier PR, where we had landed was if we're going to support configuring Node through a file, it should not be limited to loaders or the test runner or other little subsystems. It should probably support all of Node or as much as is feasible, probably along the lines of everything that you can configure through the node options environment variable. Ideally, it would be some kind of ergonomic file, like a JSON file or something like that. But we realized that we would need to parse this before V8 is loaded. Generally, we use V8 to parse JSON files. Therefore, so that was when the idea turned towards, well, what about a .m file? Because that's so much simpler of a file format. Maybe we could just write the code in C++ directly to parse that and get node options out of it and so on. And then we don't have to debate a schema options is known, we could just go straight to implementation. So when it came up recently with Test Runner, I mentioned to Iggy's like, hey, you've got these great C++ skills you've been using to help us out. You want to tackle this one, see how hard it is. And he had it working in like a matter of hours. And so, well, with the exception of the node options complexity that he's been talking about, but the rest of the end file part he had working. There was some discussion on the thread from, I think it was from, Darshan, Raisin 10, about like, well, obviously we would prefer to, use a JSON file or something. Should we land this where it's not that ergonomic to define node options _ equals and then one long line of lots of crap? And yeah, maybe. It was more that like, I think we can have both, and hopefully we can get this implemented in a relatively quick amount of time. I don't know if the end file support is worth landing without supporting node options. So where we left off was like, if Yiggy's wants to do it in 2 PRs, land this, but we'll mark it as, or merges into main, but we'll mark it as don't land on release branches. Tackle the follow-up of node options by itself. Hopefully that can get figured out, that lands, and then they both get released. Otherwise, then we'll have to come back and make a hard decision of like, is M file support without supporting node options worth landing on its own? Or other options. But I don't know if there's any decisions to be made just yet in terms, like assuming you're okay with the next step of seeing if we can get node options to work. But that's where we are at the moment.
I see there's a few hands up. Maybe we'll let Matteo jump in.
It's more of a question that I didn't dig into the thread in the issue, which is it's rather long. So I probably need to do a little bit of check, but I could not find the immediate answer. Okay. Some of our options, okay, for example, some of the ones for the M runner, for the test runner, okay, will then need to be converted to being just adding support for environment variables to set those. Is this the expectation if we don't land node option support?
Wait, you mean as different environment variables, or you mean like supporting those flags within node options?
So right now, certain things can be set for the test runner. You can set them as with flags, okay? Which if I want to take them, I can put them in node options, and then it's just they are all there for whatever reason, okay? If the node _option support for the .m file does not land, we don't have support for node _option in the M file, okay? In the .m file. How are we planning to add, some other environment variables that node works on to, for example, to configure the test runner reporter? I'm just,
I think we haven't gotten there yet. I'm not sure this would land if node option support can't be figured out.
This is the again, this is where I am. This is the question on the node option support. Because
like if he does the follow-up and he can't get it to work, we would probably revert the first PR. That's why I already put the flags on it. Don't land. When I say land, I just mean land on main, but not be released.
Okay, perfect. That was my.
Don't land on 20, etc.
I hope it's clear on where this is where my question on if we can't get the node _options to work, then it's not going. You don't want this to go forward.
Well, I don't know. I feel like let's just like not. It's premature to debate that.
Okay.
Because
perfect.
Who knows what he's going to find? Maybe he'll find that some environment variables work and not others, or some.
Yeah, this is where. So this is where I was talking about. Okay. And in fact, that even if it does not land, if it not node _option support, we can ship that. It's possible potentially to have a few environment variables to configure certain parts that are very common and very useful, and that can be supported essentially, because it can be set at a later time when V8 is already initialized, for example.
Yeah, I would say let's debate this once we get that far and see what the
Okay,
limitations
yeah,
are.
no, then I'm good. Yes, so thank you. Just hopefully that clarified my question. So yeah.
Vegas has had his hand up for a while.
Yep.
So I have a different opinion than Jeffrey on this, because I'm sort of overwhelmed about the feedback that I received, and out of them was like 98% of them is positive. I believe that we should land .env with or without node support, node option support, and land it in a release. And whether to support node options or how to configure certain parts, I think it's a different discussion, because there are lots of people interested on it. I think we sort of had something similar with node test and other like parse arcs, other features that already implemented by the userland userland modules. But because there's lots of interest and there's lots of value, and there's a requirement that most of the developers use it, we tend to add it in Node.js core, as far as I know. So I'm interested in landing this. On the other hand, I received some message from the .env organization owners and the company owners. Darshan just messaged, and that's why I'm explaining it right now. And they're happy to support us towards adding .env support, and they're positive about it.
Raphael has had his hand up.
I'm sorry, Yara.
So,
Yeah, go ahead. Yagis, can you take your hand down?
so basically, firstly, this is an experimental feature, so we don't need to have everything planned in the first moment we land it. I agree that we don't need to support those options in the first moment, and then we see the adoption and see if that's feasible or not, and then we add that support. My main concern with the node option is that on the permission side, it would read a file before even the permission was set. So this is a kind of bypass. We can document it better, but I don't think that's a good design. Another option would be refreshing the V8 state whenever the M file is the node option is read. But anyway, currently, if a user uses .env package, for instance, they don't have the support to node options as well. So I believe that I agree with Yagis in a point that we should land it without the node option support. We see that option, we see if that's feasible, and then we go with a plan. We come up with a plan to support it. And considering that it's an experimental feature, if we need, I don't think we will need, but we can send breaking chains. So that's my 2 cents on this.
Just to be clear, when you say land, do you mean like what I talked about earlier, like land it on main but not release it, or do you mean like even release it?
No, I mean release it. Yeah, release it, get feedback, and see what's going on.
Michael, your hand has been up, but
Yeah.
I wonder if we should quickly just summarize for people watching the stream or the recording the comments in the chat. There's been a few. I don't know if you want to do that or you want me to do that, or if you want to talk first before we do that.
Yeah, I wanted to ask just a basic naive question, and then maybe we can go back to the summarizing the comments. If the purpose is really to get, like, it sounded like the discussion started with, hey, we want to have some options like loader options. Wouldn't it be simpler to just read a file with a list of options that got applied? Like, if we're having trouble getting node options to work, like reading a file early on and just adding that list to the list of options that get processed might be a lot easier. And I'm just wondering if that's something that's been discussed or thought about. And I guess I'm asking Yagis or Jeffrey, right? In terms of, since that was the original sort of drive.
I don't know if that's the challenge. Like, I don't know what like Yagis can answer this. I don't know what the hiccup has been with
So
dealing with
the
node
challenge
options.
was around, yeah, so my internal challenge was that around my lack of knowledge in the booting process of Node.js. I managed to figure out certain aspects, but there's still some, like I need to spend some time. And while I'm doing it, people are requesting and giving feedback and asking about the .env pull request. That's why I wanted to make the implementation for node options in a separate PR, because that requires certain back and forth with certain people that have much more in-depth knowledge than me about that part of Node.js, and that's why I recommended this. But technically, it's not a big deal because you need to read a file and that's already implemented. Just that you need to implement it at a certain part and you need to mutate the per process environment configuration and so on and so forth.
Michael, can you lower your
Okay,
hand?
yeah, Rich, do you want to go back and summarize the,
Yeah, can you lower your hand?
I'm working on it.
Okay. So scrolling way back here, if someone else has already got a handle on what's going on, please jump in. But let's see here. Darshan asked if the maintainers of .env are okay with what's happening. I think Yag has addressed that. And Tobias, pointed out that popularity, non-contributors always like new features. If we had added every requested feature, Node would contain every single NPM package and core. That's an exaggeration, but not much of one. I agreed with that +1 to that comment that popularity, there's a lot of things that would be popular, but people would say they want, but obviously maintainability and security can trump those things. But I think we all agree about that. So moving on, Benjamin asked if we had consensus around landing.env under the assumption that node options should land, and if not possible, we'll try to reach consensus again. And I don't know the answer to that. I don't think we have consensus on that. But am I wrong?
I would be okay with landing it on its own without node option support, but I'd want to at least try to land that together if it's feasible. I feel like if we work for several weeks on node options and they're like, who knows if we'll ever figure this out, then sure, let's release it. But if we could release them both together, I feel like that's preferable.
Okay, well, go ahead, Raphael.
Yeah, just a small thing. There is a comment in the chat from Tobias that is quite interesting that I didn't think about, the environment variables that affect dependencies like the UV1, how we are going to support it. And currently, the only one that has some effect is the node options before the V8 initialization. But what about the future? If we have another flags independence for that, we won't support it. We should support it. I think that's actually a good point that we should discuss before landing on main.
Colin then pointed to a Slack thread in the TSC private Slack that people might want to check out. And Moshe says +1 to Colin's comment, even if .env lands with node option support, that won't really be easy and comfortable to use for loaders, test runner, etc. More discussion about, maybe using a JSON file. Will that eliminate the need for .env, or would be an addition to .env? And I'm doing a bad job of summarizing, so if someone else wants to clarify anything I've left out or got wrong, please go ahead.
So I think that configuring node options is a different use case than configuring environment variables. And probably 99% of configuring envars is okay with what we have to do, which is done in userland. And configuring node options is much more complicated than a one-liner environment variable. That's my take. So it would be preferable if we have a more ergonomic solution for that. JSON or something else.
Yeah, I think the upside of node option, it's already there. While we would have to come up with a JSON format, and it would probably be very hard to reach consensus. And also, it's not that easy to parse JSON without V8. Well, I don't know about that. Maybe it's not that difficult, but node option is already there, so that's nice to have. I don't think there's any problem if we release .m support without node option support. I don't think it's going to be a backward compatible or forward incompatible thing. So I don't see the point of waiting for it to happen myself. Yeah, that would be my position. Yes.
There are a lot of other environment variables so that Node is supporting, especially the one for the SSL certificate. There is a lot of them. Okay, so there might even be an argument in not supporting anything that alters the Node.js process, and only keep the env support, that flag support only for the JavaScript code that is being run into. Okay, just to be being provocative here, I don't have a good answer on this topic, but there
We
might
discussed
be
that in the thread too, though, and but then you run up against like, well, this is exactly the same as .m. Like the reason to put this in core would be to allow it to configure Node.
Oh, okay, perfect. Okay, so this is the okay. Sorry.
But yeah, you raise a good point. I'm not saying you're wrong.
Oh no, I'm not.
Like,
Again,
that was the idea behind trying to support all the environment
It's,
variable, or all the configuration of Node. Node options is just a shorthand for Node options plus other environment variables.
This is where it's useful. Okay, so there is UV thread pool size. There is the one for OpenSSL to configure the CA, I think. The certification authority, if I recall correctly. There are a few.
There are a lot of them, I guess.
Yeah, this is what this is where I am. I don't recall. You can't easily find the. We had a page in the documents. I just command line options probably. Yes, there is a lot of them. Okay, I just want to clarify. There is a lot of them. Okay.
Yeah, and I guess that last discussion, like I can understand .m support being something separate. And then like you separate those out, but then to me, at least personally, that falls apart if we're saying, well, the only reason we do it is to support node options and configuring Node itself, but then that doesn't work, or that only half works, or like it's going to be an ongoing maintenance headache to make that work. Like, I don't know. It seems like it's either it stands on its own, and so it's just good to have the functionality versus just .m, or we should make sure it actually works with the options that are the reason that's motivating it, right?
In the interest of getting to the rest of the agenda, is there anyone opposed to Yagi's continuing like what the direction he's on? He's basically got the initial part figured out, and now he's trying to figure out node options. Maybe we circle back to this once we see where that lands in terms of if it's something we think we'll be able to achieve or not, et cetera.
Yeah, that makes sense to me, right? Like if we can show that it just works with all the node option environment variables, then it's an easier choice, I think.
Antoine, were you about to say something? You unmuted. You're on. No.
Yeah.
Okay. Michael, can you lower your hand?
Yeah, just give me a sec. I'm taking notes.
Okay, sorry. And I'm not opposed to continuing work. I think that's fine. I do think that I mean, I think you're perfectly aware of this, but this is the kind of thing that you can do a lot of work on and then come to the realization that we can't release it for some unforeseen or perfectly foreseen reason. But I don't think that's what's going to happen here, but you know, it's always possible. And yeah, I think continued work is great. I kind of want to hear from Tobias and Colin, because they were the two people who struck me as somewhat skeptical, and have been commenting but not speaking. So I'm looking for, let's see, Tobias says, I'll leave a comment on the issue, can't talk right now. That's great. Okay. And
I mean, I think that the biggest objection was should this be JSON instead? I think
actually,
though that
hey, Jeffrey, Colin unmuted. I kind of want to
go
hear.
ahead.
Sorry.
Go ahead.
Yes, I guess I can comment here. I have no strong opinion about supporting environment variables files in general. I do think that it's a bad way to configure Node in general with the Node option stuff, because you know we've kind of moved away from using environment variables in favor of command line flags and passing those through Node options. And so I just feel like, yeah, that's the Slack thread that I linked to, is that we'd be basically taking a step back in that case. That's really all.
So yeah, I was just gonna say, I think, and that's perfectly valid. I think that let's continue the investigation of seeing about making node options work, because that's really the crux of this. Like, if we can figure that part out, then we can swap out the part of how do you get the data to then use where you're going to use it. Like, he could replace the get it from a .m file logic with parse a JSON file logic. You know what I mean? But regardless of what type of file format you read, if we can't figure out how to configure Node with it, then there's no point, right? So that's kind of what I was getting at, is like, let's just get to that point first. And then if we want to decide, hey, we actually don't want to support this via .m file, we want to do it through JSON or some other format, we can pivot, but at least then we'll know that it's possible with, you know, both types of input.
Okay, any other comments or discussion we should have before we move on to the next issue on the agenda? Okay, so the next one is ESM add import meta dir name and import meta file name. I don't know if anybody's been active there, wants to jump in. See, there's a few people who've got blocking comments on there. Anybody want to jump in?
We can try to summarize. So the request is to add properties to import.meta, which is available in ESM modules. So the file name would be on, of course, only on the file protocol, and it would be the path of the file. Because currently we only give the URL, the file URL, via import.meta.url. And so the request is not the first time we have this request, by the way. The request is to add those properties, so it's more convenient, especially to convert CGS module to ESM, or if someone is comfortable with the CGS file name and your name global like variables to switch to ESM. And yeah, there's a few approval, a few block on this. So my block is I guess a philosophical one. I think ESM should be using URLs because it's like protocol agnostic, and I think it's weird to have properties that are available only if the module is loaded from file protocol, and if we switch to HTTP, it's no longer there. Maybe Geoffrey can look at his block, so I don't misinterpret what you say.
Sure. Did you have anything else to add?
I guess we can circle back if I missed something.
Okay, I mean, did you want me to explain mine, or I didn't want to cut you off? That's all I mean.
Yeah, please.
So I agree with that, but I'm also, I feel like I'm not going to block on that point. Like, you know, I see the value of having more different types of metadata. We would have to figure out like what happens to these values for a module loaded over HTTP, or I guess HTTPS, since that is something we already support through a flag. My kind of like hard block that I wanted is like, I just want this standardized. I want this to go through WinterCG and for them to bless it. Anything we add to import.meta. Because we went through a years-long process with Guy and WhatWG regarding import.meta.resolve. A very frustrating process where we tried to convince WhatWG to allow import meta resolve to use our signature, which we had shipped first, which was 2 arguments and an async function. And the browser people wanted 1 argument and sync, and they just would not bend on that. And so that was a big motivation for us doing the off-thread loaders work, was to be able to syncify resolve so that it could be put in there and match the spec. So like as a general rule, the stuff in modules, we're trying to not just follow the TC39 JavaScript spec, but we're also trying to follow the HTML spec where it applies to us, and now that it exists, the WinterCG specs, so that we're not creating things that are in conflict with Dino and soon to be Bun. And so even though TC39 says that this is like hosts can do whatever they want, the HTML spec very much is not that way. And WinterCG is working on trying to standardize this area. So I see no reason why WinterCG would reject adding these properties. I mean, I hope they add them, and then I'm fine with us adding them too. But we only just asked them about it today, so I think we need to allow some time for that process to play out, and figure out all these edge cases of, what do we do for modules loaded to the network, et cetera, how are different runtimes supposed to treat this? I think that's work that should be done. I understand I feel like there's a lot of heat on that thread of a lot of people being very frustrated, and that's something that bothers me working on modules, is that kind of vitriol comes up pretty often. Like we saw that with file extensions and other things. And I just find it like difficult, it drives people away from wanting to work in this area. And just as a side point, I'd appreciate all of your guys' help in trying to tone down the volume of some of these things. I'm happy to get people what they want. I'm happy to solve user stories. But people yelling at each other just makes it all harder. So that's all I have.
Mateo's hand was up next.
Yeah, I am one of the people that has been frustrated by this since the beginning of the SM stuff. Okay, and literally, I have almost never opened up a PR or an issue for the same reason James closed this long time ago, to avoid the discussion. Okay, sorry to be. Either you feel that the word is based on URLs, or you work in paths and you work close to the operating system, and you work in, either you think philosophically that the module you run should be agnostic to where it runs, or you feel that the module needs to be aware of where it runs, and you feel that this is the thing that I like a lot about Node.js, okay? Is the fact that I am very in close touch to the operating system. And at the beginning, it was very much unclear how to get that information. Some of the utility was not even available that we have right now, okay? So at some point, I could never remember that API, so I created a module to help me out, because it was very much hard for me to figure things out. Every single time I needed a new file, I need to work on an ESM file, and it's quite a lot of other people seems to be in the same spot. And generically, this should not be the case. Okay, this kind of utility should be baked in. Okay, should allow you to get to do what needs to be done in a very explicit way. Okay, to be honest. Okay, and this has been one of the it's annoying because you have this and you don't know how to get this information. Okay, and now you need to spread, if you want to use ESM, you need to spread this thing, these 3-4 lines on every single file, like spreading everywhere. Okay. It's just very odd. Okay, so this is my point of adding this in on providing this information available to the to the module. Like, again, this is why I said we should probably call a vote on this sooner rather than later, because it is a philosophical discussion. Do you feel that the Node.js run on top of URLs, or do you feel the Node.js now runs on top of paths and files? Okay, sorry to be very much on, I want to boil it down to the core of the problem. For me, it runs on paths, okay? And most of the time it runs on path. I work with very close with the operating system, and I manipulate files. And if you work with URLs, then probably that's a completely different word than what I do every day. So I don't want to stop anybody to using URLs everywhere. I'm just saying, let's add this to people that want to work with paths. I did a quick check on quite a lot of tools around. Most of them do not support file URLs. So it's not in a form that's very much consumable by modules on NPM, which is part of the frustration, where part of the frustration comes in, okay? On getting into winters easier now, this is, this is another topic of the discussion. So it's for me, it's mostly on the agreement of file URLs are a thing or not, and if not, then maybe we just want to expose the paths and then call it a day, essentially. And it doesn't remove anything from anybody else. Like, this is the good thing about this change. It does not remove anything. So, and there is things that we could be done to improve the perf. Like, there is a lot of other stuff that we need to check. So I might just say, no, this is slowing ICSM down. So, but yeah, anyway, I'm just, I think I'm over my time. So, Michael, I think you were.
Yeah, I was next and then James, but very quickly, I just wanted to add that, like, from the recent node survey that the Next 10 team did, the lack of this information was raised. It showed through significantly in terms of people saying, like, what are my blockers to moving to ESM? What are my complaints? So it's felt by a good portion of the people out there, even those trying to move to ESM. And, so that's all I wanted to say is we have expert data that other people are struggling with this for sure as well. So James, you're next.
Yeah, so from a WinRCG point of view, import meta should be treated in much the same way as global this. The language allows hosts to do whatever they want with global this, put whatever they want there. But we still, as a runtime, need to treat that very, very carefully, because every time we add something to global scope, we run the risk of breaking code, making it not portable, whatever. So import meta is a global namespace, just like global this, and we have to be very careful what we put there. So the fact that, that this is a big decision, and anything that we put there should be treated as Semver major, it is because it is that global namespace scope. That's point one. Two, from the WinRCG's point of view, we are going to be adding import meta URL and meta resolve and Dino's the one that Dino introduced, meta main to the minimum common API. That import meta URL assumes that those import specifiers are at least interpretable as URLs, regardless of whether the runtime internally treats them as URLs, right? It at least needs to be able to present that view of it, with the idea that you should be able to use either the bearer specifier or the URL when you're importing and get the same thing back. So we, that spec is going to be normalizing, at least on this idea that import specifiers can be treated as URLs, using whatever scheme. That said, we're well within our rights to say, right, we're going to add this bit of metadata. I would just ask that if we do this, it doesn't even have to be a formal spec or anything like that, just a write-up, something that is submitted to WinRCG that says this is what these fields are, this is what their meaning is, and just get input from the other runtimes to make sure that they're not planning on doing something else. Like, we don't know, like, Bun or Dino might be right now in the process of adding import meta fields that overlap these exact same purpose with a different name, or whatever else, and we just want to make sure that they're not. So having opening an issue, we can go talk on the Matrix channel or the next WinRCG call and just say, this is what we're planning. We'd love for all the runtimes that need this to do this in the same way, and let's just have a little bit of coordination rather than just unilaterally landing something without having that conversation first. So personally, I'd like to see us go ahead and land these, but I want to have that conversation, at least raise the conversation with WinRCG first.
So I think back to Matteo, your point was maybe that there were two different concerns. One is like, are people willing to do this at all? And two, would we gate it on like getting some agreement feedback from WinRCG, right?
Yeah,
so
it's like, from my point of view on the topic of, is this something that we want to do? I don't think that it comes to as other people have said, and I think we can all agree on that. It comes from a philosophical point of view. Okay, are ESM due to work only with with URLs or not? Okay, this is a question mark, and I'm just it's. This is the generic discussion on the actual, like having a very simple way, like sensing a property, reading something from a line or whatever to get that information. I think that would be a very good way to get those data. Okay, so I on the actual mechanism to get the stuff, this is up to discussion. Okay, I don't want to. I think import meta file name, import meta rename works extremely well. It's simple implementation, but maybe there are other better ways. Okay, and look, it's if we Ban has added them mostly because they have a much leaner discussion point. Yeah, so I just wanted, like, from my point of view, I have no on the implementation point of view, this is up for discussion, I guess. Okay, on where we put them, or the fact that we go to WinRCG. Or I don't think that we should, more or less, but I agree with James' point. Okay, so it's if a lot of my point of rushing this out essentially would be if we wanted to make it a minor. If we make it a minor, then and an argument can be made there, I think. Then we might want to ship it as soon as possible. If we plan to have it as a major, and an argument can be made to ship it as a major because it's like a global. Yes, I agree, James. Then we can just say, oh, it's a global and whatever, so it can go in the next one, and then it's actually way simpler. So, and we can wait. We can have this discussion in a few months. Okay, this is the point. But the starting point is just a philosophical discussion, and I don't think the philosophical agreement can be like this is. It boils down to something very philosophical here. It's not a lot of the code side, to be honest.
So I do agree with Rich that we should probably try and close this one out for today so we can handle the last issue and then move on to the private section. But you know, I think, Matteo, would it make sense for you to open an issue in the TSC to see if we can get consensus on just like, do we expose this or not, independent of how? And then we can, you know, if that doesn't start to trend towards consensus, we can move that to a vote. And then, you know, that's the first principle to say, okay, and then having done that, let's move on. Jeffrey, I see your hand up.
When you say, do we expose this? I think, what do you mean? Like, is that more the philosophical question of like, are we interested in providing some kind of API for working with paths and ESM?
Yes.
Not because like I'm okay with that personally, but I definitely want to go through the winter CG process. So like, I feel like that should be clear that like we're voting on one, not both.
Yeah,
you know
that's
what I
fine.
mean?
Yeah, I have. I think that's the first point that we need to, like, it's the feedback seems pointing us into having this in. So I'm happy to mediate on that point.
And we're not talking about file URL to path, which is something that we already have and allows
It needs
to
to be
work.
something easy and mnemonic, okay? In something very easy that we provide immediately, so people can just type. They just know, okay? This is the reason why it's import meta file name or whatever. If I could have the same variable of CJS, I would probably recommend we use the same. To be honest, okay? If we had them, so yeah.
Okay, so yeah, so I think that's a good next step, and hopefully that can get the question. We've answered that first one, and then, you know, we can move on to the specifics. The next issue is freeze releases and website changes pending fixed caches. I don't think there's anything new to discuss on that, and we still have problems. There was a discussion with Foundation and some people from the Linux Foundation in terms of asking for help, and they were looking more generically, but we did have some discussion on that specific topic. So I think we're now in a wait to see if they can help us on that front. Otherwise, you know, I don't think there's a current path forward to completely resolve that. The other one is remaining OSS funding. So next, I know Raphael, you wanted to talk a bit about that one.
And actually not, it's just a heads up that, I mean, actually we need to have a consensus. The next step is to move forward with that proposal. Basically, we have 39,000 to work on, and my proposal is to work on the security, more specifically in automating the security release process, so we can ship more security releases often, because currently it's a pain. So if someone objects to it, please reach out in the thread. If you think that we should be using that money for something else, reach out in that thread. But keep in mind that this is a OSSF funding, so it's not meant to be globally on Node.js. It should be focused on security, as far as I know. So if we have a consensus, we be open a form or a way to get contacts from TSC or core contributors that want to jump in and get that contract, and that's it. Yeah,
right. And I think the ask here is like, if there's any objections with that it being targeted at automating the security release process, and that, you know, if the answer is there aren't any objections, then we wouldn't necessarily come back to the TSC with the specific statement of work. I think it would be the people who are doing the security steward work, the releasers, who we would want to have, like, yeah, doing that work seems to make sense, versus coming back to the TSC at that. So putting that along with, like, either, you know, object to the approach, or if you think we need more than those people involved, you know, have that discussion. Otherwise, that'll be the trend forward, I think. And I think there is an issue, right, Raphael, so people can object there. And I guess, like we'd say, if there aren't any objections by end of week, then we'll assume we can move forward.
yeah, exactly. They should mention in the OSF funding issue contains the work. Basically, I would paste in the chat. This is the work that I've been planning. I have been doing some of this work. But you know, it's a longer process, so we definitely need help. But in other terms, the end goal is to have just buttons or things very easy to ship a release of Node.js, regardless if it's a security or a regular release. So these should help us a lot.
Okay, so I don't see any other comments, and we're down to 6 minutes. So I will, thanks for everybody who's watching the stream, and I will stop that. And if everybody